So one of the questions that always comes up when working with our home selling clients is what strategy should we take when listing their home for sale? Should we price the property low, less than what it's worth in order to get multiple offers and sell for way over the asking price? Or should we just list for a price that is closer to what we're happy with and wait for the right buyer? And that's what I'm going to be talking about today. My name is John Pasalis. My team and I help home buyers and sellers throughout the greater Toronto area make smarter real estate decisions. If you'd like to meet up with me and one of my agents to discuss your own real estate decisions, you can click the link in the show description notes below. So, as I said, today we're going to unpack, or I'm going to unpack some of the key things that I believe agents and their seller clients should be thinking about when deciding how to price their home for sale. I'm going to unpack some of the myths about multiple offers and pricing strategy, and wrap up with a few questions that I think sellers should be asking the agents that they're interviewing about pricing strategies. Now, before I kind of jump into some of the key things that sellers should be thinking about, it's kind of helpful to unpack what I'd say are the two most common strategies when it comes to pricing a home. Now, anyone who kind of works in the greater Toronto area market or who's bought homes or sold homes knows that a very common strategy is to basically price a home for less than what it's worth and to set an offer date and hopefully to get multiple offers. So for example, if you have a home that's worth $900,000, you might see some realtors listing it for $850 or $799, or some might list it for even $699. I mean, some of these ridiculous prices. Prices that are not what a seller is willing to take, of course. They're just artificially low prices. They're designed to drive people through and get people to view it with the hope that on their scheduled offer date, they're going to get tons of offers and a price that is way over asking and ideally above what the home is worth. That's a lot of times what sellers are hoping for, but at a minimum, getting a price that the home is worth. So that's one strategy that sellers are taking in this market. The other strategy is just basically saying, you know what, the home's worth 900. We're going to list it for just over 9, maybe 950 or 940 or 930. And we're just going to wait for the right buyer to make an offer. And that's kind of the second approach that sellers can take when they're listing their home for sale. Now, when it comes to deciding what the right strategy is, I'd say there's generally kind of three key considerations that sellers need to be thinking about and their agent needs to be thinking about. And the first is the market conditions. Now, I think one important thing to think about when I talk about market conditions is not what is going on in the news. It's not what you hear about. It's not what your friends told you they got multiple offers, so you should get multiple offers. It's not what realtors hear in their office. It's really about what is going on in your particular area and for your particular house type. So it is very specific. So even if most homes in the city, for example, in the greater Toronto area are getting multiple offers, it doesn't necessarily mean every market is the same. Sometimes we'll be in a market where, if we're downtown Toronto, things are competitive in the East End, but there aren't as many bidding wars in the West End or in the suburbs, like Pickering might be competitive, but Newmarket's not. They're not getting multiple offers. So it's really about understanding the very local dynamics of the market and understanding not just if homes are selling for over asking. And I think this is a mistake a lot of agents and realtors make. They see that the home just like yours sold down the street 2 weeks ago and it sold for 100 over asking, and well, you should follow the same strategy. That's kind of not the information you need, because you don't just want to look at what homes sold for. As agents, we need to understand what's the showing traffic on the homes in the neighborhood that we're in from the other properties that are listed. How many offers did they actually get on their offer night, right? When we figure out that a home sold for 100 over asking, did they get 8 and 10 offers and it was a complete frenzy on their offer night? Or did the seller and their agent only get 1 offer or 2 offers and they just feel grateful that they even got the price they got? And of course, having that slightly more nuanced information kind of changes our perception and understanding the market. Obviously, if the situation in the market right now is the former, where they got 10 offers and it's crazy, then we're more confident that we would get the same kind of reaction in the market. But if our neighbor only got one offer, two offers, even if they sold for well over asking, it makes us less confident that the market is an overly competitive one that would support potentially, again, multiple offers in the future. So we need to be very mindful of the very local market dynamics, I think is the first important thing. Again, for that specific house type, so whether it's a condo or a house, and for that very local neighborhood. It's not enough to just look at Toronto or look in your own municipality. You have to look at the neighborhood statistics and the trends. The other thing to keep in mind when we talk about market conditions is it needs to be timely. You know, if we're meeting with a client in the middle of May, talk about listing their property in the middle of June, we can't even talk about pricing strategy today because the market could change significantly between, over the span of 4 weeks. So these decisions are often made the week before we hit the market. And especially as you move towards the summer months, and this is common in most sort of most of the year and most years in the GTA, the market can be very frenzied in the spring, but once you start hitting end of June, beginning of July, things just naturally cool down. A lot of buyers who were active just go to the cottage, hit pause. So the market could really cool down. It doesn't necessarily mean it's all of a sudden a buyer's market and prices are plummeting. It just means that it's not as competitive. There aren't as many buyers out there. So we have to be mindful of that, especially as we move towards the summer months. Is the market shifting? So again, this research, this analysis, and these decisions are not made when you're interviewing realtors. They are made usually a week before you hit the market, because that is kind of the most timely information that kind of helps inform your decision making. So if you're pricing for multiple offers, you just need to be confident that that is what's going on in your neighborhood, that your neighbors are getting 4, 5, 8, 10 offers, right? You're less confident if your neighbors are getting one offer or two offers on their offer night, or very few showings on during the week that they're listed. This is a sign that the market's slowing down, and we're less confident that our pricing low strategy is going to work. So understanding the market conditions is, I'd say, the first and most important thing. The second consideration is the actual house itself. So, and what I mean by that is, even if we are looking at listing a home in a neighborhood or an area where, homes are getting multiple offers, sometimes there's something unique about that home that may make it a little bit harder to sell, or there's just not as many buyers in that segment. So if we're, selling a home in a neighborhood that is predominantly 3-bedroom kind of family style homes, and we're selling a higher end 2-bedroom home, well, that is a bit more of a niche product or a niche market. We might be less confident we're going to get tons of offers on our offer night. Or if there's something unique about the neighborhood, maybe there's not a lot of comparables, or the home's like a major fixer upper. Again, certain things like that may make it a little bit harder to get kind of a successful kind of offer night where you're going to get the price you want. Usually, successful offer nights are typically with, I don't want to say cookie cutter homes. That kind of doesn't sound great, but like homes that are, are going to sell well, like the very typical in the neighborhood, hit a lot of check boxes for a lot of buyers, for that particular neighborhood, and, not something that is a unique home or unique layout. And those are the things that we need to be mindful of when we're looking at pricing homes. So the second, again, is some unique characteristics of the property itself. And the third thing is, of course, the seller's preferences, expectations, and needs. I mean, sometimes we work with sellers who just don't want to list low and do an offer night. They're just kind of more traditional. They want to list high and wait. They're not in a rush. And that's 100% fine. Again, I think I find it interesting when I hear realtors kind of lecturing their clients about what they should and shouldn't do. I mean, at the end of the day, our job's to kind of give the seller option, obviously make a recommendation, but ultimately it's their property, and they can decide what's to do. And if they want to list high, I mean, all the power to them. And in many cases that strategy's worked, and sometimes it hasn't. And, but at the end of the day, again, it's the seller's property. Now, when it comes to the seller's preferences and needs, the other consideration, of course, is if they bought a home, and is there an urgency for them to sell? Because that also might influence the strategy that we take. If they're in a bit more of a rush to sell, I mean, we can't list for a very high price and just wait for the right buyer because we don't have, weeks and weeks to wait. We have to sell quickly. I mean, hopefully buyers or sellers do not find themselves in that situation. If you're buying a home first, you got to give yourself plenty of time to sell so you're not pressured to sell. But sometimes we get calls like that and someone does need to sell pretty quickly. And that obviously that influences the pricing strategy a little bit. So, when thinking about how to price it, again, we take all of this information, we think about what's going on in the market. Is it the type of home that's going to get, likely to get multiple offers? Is it in a neighborhood that's likely to get multiple offers? And of course, the seller's considerations. We have to decide all of them. And recently, we sold a couple of properties. I sold it with my team like over the past month or so that where we took sort of the opposite strategy that the market is generally taking. Most agents these days are just pricing low and setting an offer date and selling for over asking. We didn't do that. And I think these two properties are kind of good examples. One of them was in a small neighborhood called Graydon Hall, which is kind of on the southwest corner, basically, of the DVP and the 401. There's not a lot of comparables. I mean, all the comparables are in that tiny little pocket because the homes that are north of the 401 are not as comparable. The ones east of the DVP are not as comparable. West of Don Mills are kind of industrial and commercial. So there's not a lot of comparable sales in that area. So it was, a type of home where I think one of the challenges we saw is like a lot of buying agents had a hard time coming up with sort of the value or what a reasonable value is because not only were there relatively few sales, but the house types were quite different. So I had some agents calling me and say, well, how can we justify this price when, this other home down the street sold for less than us? And they weren't taking into account the fact that the home that sold down the street for less than what we were listed for was half the size because it was a much smaller bungalow, had a carport, didn't have a double car garage. There are a lot of factors that some agents don't really adjust for. They just look at a home, it's sold for this price, it has a similar number of bedrooms, so it must be the same. And they're not paying MPAC, which is the Municipal Property Assessment Corporation, to look up the square footage. If they did, they'd see that they're very different sizes. So they're not doing their research. And, one of the things we have to do, of course, is just educate the agents. A lot of times they'll call and say, well, how did you come up with this number? And we have to explain it to them. And, good buying agents will kind of understand and listen and take that into account and factor that into their analysis. So that was one property we kind of priced it higher and kind of got the price we wanted for by taking that strategy. Another home was closer to downtown near Witchwood Barns. Again, a pretty unique home on a kind of quiet street where homes don't really come up for sale. It's right by Witchwood Barns. And the home needed a massive renovation. And, with properties like that for buyers, sometimes it's very tough to make to list one week and kind of take offers the following week to envision how you're going to renovate it and get rough costs. Because that's generally what a lot of buyers are doing. They're trying to think about what it would cost them to fix it because that influences what price they pay. So we didn't want to price low. I mean, in this case, actually, the seller also didn't want to price low, but I mean, independent of her decision, I think it was the right strategy. So we just listed high and waited. And again, it was a strategy that worked out well. I think in both cases, we sold in under a couple of weeks anyways. So again, there were kind of strategies that were specific to those homes and specific to those neighborhoods. Even though most homes or in some of those areas we're getting kind of multiple offers anyways, and the market's still competitive. Again, those properties were ones that we thought would have worked out better if we were kind of listing it a little bit higher and just waiting. And in both cases, it worked out well. So I'm going to kind of wrap up before we wrap up with some questions. I mean, I thought for realtors, I think it'd be good to kind of unpack a couple of myths that I often hear about pricing strategies. And I think it's good for sellers to understand them. And the first one is, a lot of times you hear stories about, well, if you price low, you're always going to get multiple offers, or it's easy to sell for over asking. You just price it for 100 or 200,000 less than what it's worth, and it's going to sell. And that's not necessarily true. I mean, I can tell you for a fact, there are some cases where if you price it even for 100 or 150 less than what it's worth, your offer date could come and go and you get no offers. I mean, it doesn't mean that the home is worth what you're listed for. It's just that the market has slowed down. And there aren't or the sentiment has changed and buyers just aren't ready to compete. And, again, because things have slowed down, maybe it's the summer months. And this was quite common, I'd say, in the second half of 2023. When the Bank of Canada kind of hiked rates, the market just fell off a cliff. It was frenzied in the first half of the year, and then just demand plummeted. So it didn't really matter how you're pricing it. Only the nicest homes in that period were getting multiple offers. So they just hit tons of check boxes. They were kind of turnkey, kind of perfect, look great on Instagram. Like those homes would still for asking, but a lot of other homes were not. And a lot of decent homes that normally would get bidding wars weren't selling. So this idea that if you price it low, you'll get tons of offers is not necessarily the case. And even if you do get tons of offers, it doesn't mean you're going to get the right offers, which kind of leads me to the second kind of myth I hear. And I think this is one we sometimes hear from realtors, unfortunately. And it's this idea that, you price it low, you have an offer date, and on your offer date, you get 2 or 3 offers. And, the best offers are what the home's worth. This is what the market's telling us the home is worth, and this is what you should sell for. And again, I think this as well is not true. Obviously, good realtors kind of don't talk like this, but I think it's important to understand the market value before you list, of course. And if you're getting offers that are significantly less than what the comparables are telling you, it doesn't mean that your home is worth this low price. Like at the end of the day, when we list homes for sale and I get like 10 offers on a property, at least 6 of them are less than what the home is even worth, right? So in our simple example, if you have a home that's worth 900 and you list it for 849 or something like that, you're gonna have 6 out of the 10 that are offers that are under 900, right? And that's just the way the market is. And sometimes 7 out of 10. You're only getting 2 or 3 buyers that are actually making competitive bids. So if you happen to get the 2 or 3 that are unrealistic, it doesn't mean your home's worth that low price. It could just be a coincidence. It could be the market is slowing down. It could be that another 2 or 3 homes that are very similar to yours hit the market the same week and they're all taking offers the same night and they split the competition. So if you get offers on your offer night that are well below what your original expectations were, and I think this is important when dealing with agents to understand what those expectations are before you hit the market. You don't take those offers, or you shouldn't take those offers. I think some agents try to kind of nudge sellers to just take these offers that are well below kind of market value. But you don't necessarily want to do that. There are kind of rare cases where you might consider it, but generally no. What you would probably do is just terminate your offer strategy. Say, okay, my multiple offer strategy failed. And what realtors typically do, and a lot of buyers will see this, is that same home will come on the market for a much higher price. The sellers will relist it and their agent will relist it for a price that they're happy with. And I remember when I would work with clients who were from from Europe, they would hear this and they'd think, this is just insane. I mean, they would be like, you listed for 849, you didn't sell, and now you're asking 930 or something like that. And I think it sounds nuts to people who I guess are not used to the Toronto market. But again, it's not that it didn't sell at 849 because it wasn't worth it or anything like that. Again, it's purely coincidence, market timing. And again, what else is on the market? So it doesn't necessarily mean you sell for a low price. You just list it higher and wait. And again, that strategy typically works because people understand that this is now what the seller is looking for. And the last myth I'll kind of touch on, again, is sometimes a myth that agents will talk about, which is this idea that, if you list too high and you stay on the market too long and you have to reduce, well, it looks bad. It looks like a stale listing. Again, I think this is old school real estate salesy lingo. I mean, I think it's a bit ridiculous. I don't think that's necessarily the case. I mean, you're going to know very quickly if every home in your area is selling pretty quickly, and you're not getting any showings or very few showings, you're going to know that you're overpriced. And no, I don't think it necessarily leads to a stigma if you reduce it. It just shows that as a seller, you're adjusting your expectations, which is quite normal. And this is very normal in the high-end market. I mean, in the high-end market, everyone lists for more than what the property's worth. And it's not uncommon to see price reductions of like 10% because, sellers were aggressive in their pricing strategy. So I don't necessarily think it's a terrible thing. I think we just need to be mindful of how we're pricing. But no, I mean, if a seller wants to take that strategy, I don't necessarily think it's a bad one. You just adjust based on your showings, your feedback, and all of that you're getting. And if you have to reduce, you have to reduce. So those are the myths I'd say that I often hear about pricing strategy. I mean, I'll wrap up with a few questions because I think part of this video, this channel is really, hopefully people can kind of take information away and think about this, not after they've hired someone, but as they're going through the process. Like, what are the things that, you want to be asking agents when you're interviewing them? And I think the first question I think it's important for sellers to ask is to ask realtors what their approach is to pricing strategy. I mean, how do they approach it? And I think I'd say like one mistake I often hear, and you should be mindful of this, is like the realtor who tells you the strategy that they're using with all of their clients in the GTA. If they say, I'm telling all my clients to price low, I mean, that's a red flag again, because you have to understand that they don't understand that pricing strategy is very regional, it's very local. It's the same strategy doesn't apply to everyone. Or if they have, they tell you this bulletproof strategy, how they always price low and they always get multiple offers. Again, that's a bit of a red flag because there's no bulletproof strategy that's going to work for every home and every market. So again, I think the answers that you would expect would be a little bit nuanced, and educated rather than kind of a one-size-fits-all solution. The second question I think you want to ask is how do they decide which strategy to take? And, I think it should be some combination of kind of what I talked about above. And, they could bring up other concerns, which is fair. I mean, this isn't an exhaustive list, but again, there should be some consideration and thought to how an agent approaches it. They should be talking about how they'll likely be advising based on what's going on just before you list. They shouldn't be advising you 6 to 8 weeks before your list date how you're going to price your home, because the market can change in 6 to 8 weeks. So there should be some discussion about sort of the ideas, the strategy, the information they use that they use to advise you, their seller client, when coming up with a pricing strategy. And then the last question I think is kind of touching on a topic we talked about earlier, which is if you list low and you don't get the price you want, well, what do you do? And I think it's important to understand and hear what the realtor's advice is in that situation. And again, I don't think there's necessarily a right or wrong, because again, if you don't get that price you want, a lot of times it depends on the information, the data. Well, if it's a little bit less than what you want and our showing traffic's low and we're not getting, everyone else is selling for a little bit less, well, maybe take it. But if it's substantially less, you shouldn't be taking substantially less because the market's slowing down. Again, it could just be a coincidence and market timing. So again, I think there should be some nuance in the answers about how to advise a client if they don't get the price they want on their offer night, because that happens, especially when the market is slowing down. As you move to the summer, you can price low and expect a certain price, but that strategy doesn't always work. And as the market starts slowing down, it often backfires. And what you end up seeing is like, you'll get some agents who just price low, especially like I said, as you move to the summer and sort of mid to late June, their offer nights will fail. They'll start to relist. July will come. You'll still see people pricing low. Offer nights fail. They relist. So you need to kind of be looking at these dynamics and understand the realtor needs to kind of advise you how they would approach it if their offer night fails. Again, part of this could be just timing and the competition on the market in the week that you're listed and on your particular offer night. So I hope you found that helpful. If you have any questions, please post them in the comments below, or you can always shoot me an email at askjohn@movesmartly.com.